tool so many of you wanted, and it's finally here, the Makita XGT 40 volt plunge router. It weighs 3.27 kgs without a battery. It is variable speed ranging from number 1, 8,000 right through to 25,000 RPM. Let's get that out of the way. It has hidden behind the handle AWS. Depending on whether you buy this as a bare tool or a kit and what configuration it comes with, it may or may not have the chip in it. Something to check whenever you buy a Makita tool. Sometimes they have the chip, sometimes they don't, so check that out. But before I tell you all the other specs, I'll just tell you all the sort of things that come in the box with it. So you've got this front guard here, this dust deflector thing, it just slots in like that. Comes with the dust port. It comes with this fence. Does not come with those driver bits. Comes with this rip guide fence dealie, which has a micro adjustment on it. And it comes with a wrench, of course, although that's missing in action. And it comes with a template guide and another couple of inserts for your collet. I'm not a huge fan of the way they've done this, but we'll talk about that later. If you are familiar with Makita routers, even the trim routers, you'll be pretty familiar with this sort of setup. It looks pretty much the same. It's all the same sort of thing and fits with some of the same accessories, such as this in the back here. I haven't checked if it fits with these exact rods or whether it fits with the other rods that come with this one, but let's have a wee look-see. It's these rods, so that's good. I don't have to bother changing it. So that there goes on. This is an optional accessory, like a high-end version of one of these. It's a bit wider, gives you a few more options and a bit better, finer. You can move more different things. You can slide this around, you can slide this back and forward, you can do all sorts of different stuff compared to the standard one. And also it comes with two different sets of rails. So if you have the larger rails, I think these ones are 8mm and these ones are 10mm. So depending on which router you've got, it should fit pretty much every Makita router. Up until this point, I've been using it on the plunge base on the little 1/4" routers, which I should have had up here on the bench, I suppose, just to show. But I don't, and they're at least 3 meters away from me, so I'm never going to get around to getting those. You've got the standard 3-point system here where you can set these to any height you want with a spanner, loosen this, push this, and then you can have a quick release of your depth setting there. And you've got it in position you want, you can just lock that back up like so. And then there is a fine adjustment here at the top going up in 0.1mm increments, and we've got the gauge scale in the back there, which is a little bit hard to see to line up with your red marker there. By loosening this one here, you can just tweak the upper limit of the tool body. You can get it to go up slightly there, you can see it coming up. So you've got a little bit of adjustment there for dialing everything in perfectly. Now to the controls. So you hold it like so, of course. On the right hand side you have a power button on the top. You need to turn that on before you can pull the trigger. Now this button on the side is just a lock, it's not a safety feature. So when you have the trigger in, push that in and it will lock your trigger on. Push the trigger again and it will release it. Over by your left hand you have this lever, which I'll show you from the other side in a moment. So that is to lock your plunge and release your plunge. As it is at the moment, it is loose, unlocked, push down, flick the lever down, now locked, flick it back up and you can pop back up again. From the other side, it looks like this. So this is the lever. It's not in the optimum place, I feel, for me. I need to use it a bit more just to be sure, but not 100% liking the position of that when compared to some other routers. I don't know what routers. I need to find some 1/2" routers that we can compare this to. Maybe I'll be able to find some before the end of this video. It has a couple of LED lights, which you'll see in a moment when I put a battery on. AWS, like I say. And I suppose that's about it. So let's see what it sounds like. Let's bung on a 2.5 amp hour battery here. We'll bung her on full whack. Turn it on with your right hand, lights come on, they'll stay on for about 5 seconds, like that. So turn it on, pull the trigger. About 2 seconds that seemed for the brake. Now if we leave that for 5 seconds, it's going to automatically switch off. Now the trigger doesn't work without tapping that top one again. I know it's annoying to have to tap buttons all the time, turn them on and off, but that one's pretty easy, and it eliminates having to push your thumb in the side like you do with some other models. Now with this battery on the 2.5, it looks and feels pretty good. With this battery, weight wise, you're looking at what, just under 4 kgs, probably like 3.9. Now in Makita Japan's promo video for this tool, they claim that you'll get 32 meters of cutting 9mm particle board. But as far as I can see, they don't say which router bit that they use. So it looks like it's about a 1/2 inch bit, so it's making 1/2 inch cuts. I'm going to use this one because it's the smallest 1/2 inch one that I've got here at the moment. It's a Makita bit, it's a 3/4 inch, so it's going to use a bit more juice. But I have plenty, thankfully, of 9mm particle board. Not something I normally have, but I have a shitload of it at the moment. So I'm going to do the same test that they did, except the bit, I don't know about the bit, but we're going to use the same product to cut through. I've got a 2.5 amp hour battery charging up now, so that we've got one fresh off the charger. And at the same time, we'll see how the dust extraction goes, although I don't have high hopes. Now they say 32 meters, that's about 26 2/3 passes width-wise, if this is 1200 wide. So let's see if it can do it. That's halfway, and yeah, dust extraction as good as most routers. In other words, useless. Hardly any point in there, even, well, I don't even know if there is any point. Let's have a look in the actual vac. So I took the bag out and everything so you could see how much it collected. So that's how much it's collected. That's how much it hasn't collected. So I'm guessing it's definitely collecting less than 50% of the dust. Got that done in the nick of time. She's yeah, she's coming down. Well, at least it'll wash the sawdust away, I guess. So I finished that test about 15 minutes ago, and looking at the battery temperature, it is very warm. So we're looking at around the 50-degree mark at the hottest points on this battery, and that's on the outside, remember. So with a 2.5 amp hour battery or a 2 amp hour battery, they would be very hot. If you're doing a lot of passes, I would recommend a bigger battery, although you probably don't want to go too much bigger on this particular tool, just because an 8 amp hour battery on the top is going to look like this, which is a little bit crazy and adds well over a kg to the weight of this thing. So I mean, ideally you want to use the smallest batteries possible to keep the weight down and the maneuverability. Now, how many of these cuts did I get? Well, 18 it turns out. And the last one was a bit painful, but there was also a few issues along the way. If you have a look at this particular one, at one point the guide was not done up tightly at these points. I should have checked that. Came straight out of the box. I never checked that. And if you're wondering why I haven't got this set up right, like normally this should be along here for the fine adjustment, it's because I wanted to get this as close to the edge as possible, and if I had that along there, it would be in different positions, so that worked out to be the exact spot I wanted. So I got 18 passes, which is about 8 short of what I wanted, but like I say, I didn't know what bit they're using. This bit looks a lot bigger than what they were probably using. They were probably using a 1/2 inch bit, and by 1/2 inch I mean a 1/2 inch cutting width and a 1/2 inch shaft, so 1/2 inch bit, whereas this is a 3/4 inch 1/2 inch bit. Driving that extra mass and cutting out that extra material will chew through more battery. So if you take that into account, probably works out about right with the runtime. Now let me see if I can find my green and red one again, and we'll have a quick comparison with them, and then I'm guessing you guys are going to want to see which one's the most powerful. Stay tuned. Now I guess after what you've just seen, the first thing we should talk about is dust extraction. So with the Makita, first before we get into that, yes, I was pushing it the right direction. If you're asking that question, then you don't know much about routers, okay? That's the way they go. The orientation was completely correct. I should do another video on that, about how to use a router properly. Anyway, today we're not going to be talking about that, but we're going to talk about the dust extraction, and as you saw, it comes out this way. Well, as you can see right there. But when you're doing a groove, dust collection with routers is just very problematic at the best of times. I mean, trying to get, I think they're the worst tools around basically for dust extraction. Just going to take that off just because it's annoying me. The dust was all shooting out the groove that I was cutting, and that is always going to happen when you cut a groove with a router. At least the groove was open in the bottom so the dust could get away. Often if you're cutting a groove, which you'll probably see when we do some tests later on, I haven't done them yet, but I'm guessing it's going to happen. When you do a groove that has a blind bottom, then you will just pack that groove with dust. Especially if it's slightly damp, it'll just jam in there, because it's trying to fire out this way, because it's not sucking out here, and there's multiple reasons for that. One is it's firing backwards through that groove instead of coming out here. But if you're cutting on the edge of something, doing a round over, it's going to behave different. It's going to behave different to plunging and blah, blah, blah. There's so many different factors, different router bits. As you can see on this one, if we take a look down here, we have a massive air gap around here as well for dust to go in all directions. Sometimes I do this. This is one that I use on the 1/4 inch router. It's slightly different. It's very similar, but slightly different to this one. This one here is actually missing that tang there to hold it in place. And something I've noticed, if you've got the hose pulling on this, you can easily actually tweak it off like that, even when it's done up completely tight. So it's not the greatest thing in the world for dust collection. We quickly look at this one. This one will go out either side, because you can just take it out like so, spin it around. So that can help if the dust is going a direction you don't want it to. And the Milwaukee, same thing, goes in like that, or can come around this side. I think this one is the best system. You take this and slot it in through here, boom. Tighten that up, boof, boof. It's got the best system for putting in the dust extraction. As for dust extraction, I don't think any of them are any good for actually doing dust extraction, depending on what you're doing, like I say. But basically, if you catch 50%, you're lucky. Taking a look at weights, pretty fair to say that Milwaukee's going to be the heaviest, right? Because A, Milwaukee tools are usually heavier than everything else anyway, but B, this is not a plunge router like these two are. These two are fixed plunge routers basically, so they don't have a fixed base and a plunge base option like the Milwaukee. So the Milwaukee, even though it looks like a plunge at the moment, this pops out and you can attach it to a different base, which I haven't gotten shot at the moment. So you can use it as a fixed base or a plunge base, whereas the other two are plunge only. Anyway, the weight without a battery or the dust chute and stuff on it is 4.14 kgs. The HiKoki comes in at just over 3 kgs, significantly lighter, and the new Makita 3.33. Does have a bit in it though. So around 300 grams heavier than the HiKoki, but around 800 grams lighter than the Milwaukee. Physical size wise, you can see that the HiKoki and the Makita are similar. HiKoki is narrower though, looking at that. Oh yeah, height wise they're very much the same, but the HiKoki significantly narrower here. Has it got a smaller motor in it? Why is it so much narrower? But as for height and the base and stuff, they're roughly the same, whereas the Milwaukee has a completely round base. These two have a flat side. This one completely round and significantly higher, heavier, wider. Look at the width. The Milwaukee is an entire handle wider. Comparing it to the HiKoki, handle width, pretty much identical. Looking at how you turn these things on with the switches, the HiKoki, you can't pull the trigger without pushing down this safety trigger unlock here, and then you can push your trigger, and then if you hold the trigger in and then push that down a little bit further, it will lock. Tap and it will unlock. Now you can't push it again. The Milwaukee, very different because it's got this separate base. It's just a good old-fashioned slide switch on and off. So when you're using the tool, you it's quite a long way away from where your hand is. Does slide on and off very easily though. No safety or anything you have to push first. It's just on and off. And the Makita, similar to the HiKoki, except that you push the power button, then push the trigger. Once you've released the trigger, 5 seconds later that will turn off, and then when you push the trigger nothing will happen. Push that again and away you go. Once you've got the trigger pushed in, you can lock it with a button on the side like the HiKoki button on the top. So it's similar to that and just takes a little bit of getting used to. Because I'm so used to that one, I kept pulling the trigger and it had to, just took a little bit longer to get used to. If you're only using one of them, then it's not a problem. You'll get used to it and that'll be that. When you're swapping between tools all the time, it gets confusing. Makita goes up to 25,000 RPM, as I said, and that's 5 on the dial. The HiKoki goes up to 6 on the dial, and it's also 25,000 RPM, but it starts much higher, so it starts at 11,000, the Makita only 8,000. So if you need really slow stuff, the Makita would be a better option. Milwaukee also goes up to 6 and starts at an even higher rate of 12,000 and goes up to the same maximum speed of 25,000 RPM. So if you like slow routing, you're using bits that require slower speeds, Makita is a better option, far bigger range. The depth setting on the HiKoki is easily adjustable. As you saw, that just slides down. Set that to what you want. Very similar to the Milwaukee as well. Milwaukee one doesn't slide quite the same. You've got the fine adjustment there. Unfortunately, even though this is New Zealand, it's still in 1/16 of an inch. Whereas the HiKoki, oh, where's the fine adjustment? No fine adjustment on the HiKoki. A little bit disappointing. And the Makita got the fine adjustment, got this top depth stop that I showed you earlier, and a little bit more convoluted to get it to go up and down because you've got a thread and it goes up and down. It's not just a drop like the other two. So it's sort of good and bad in that way. It can take a little bit longer to set, but you've got a bit more accuracy in trying to dial in the exact depth you want. You can adjust the settings on here as well as the Makita. And the Milwaukee has 6 steps that aren't adjustable but are so close together that it doesn't really matter. When it comes to the depth of plunge, I haven't tested them all to see what they accurately are, but if we trust the manufacturers on this one, then it would be 50 millimeters, 60 millimeters, and 63.5, or 2 inches, nearly 2.5 inches, and 2.5 inches. When it comes to doing those plunges, they all have a lever, and they're all different. So if we spin them all around this way, so you'll now see these two have it on the right, which is the left when you've got it around the other way, and this one has it on the left, which is the right when you have it around the other way. So with the HiKoki, this one's quite nice. You push it down to lock with your thumb, and then you can flick it up with your middle finger or forefinger, and because it's got this sort of double-edged boomerang sort of style switch, it's easy to flick in lots of different ways while you're using the tool. So down, up, you know. So quite good for loosening and locking your plunge. The system on this one is very different. For starters, like I say, we're on the left this time, and this one, instead of locking and unlocking, it's always locked. It automatically locks, and when you push it down, it's loose, let it go, it locks again. So release, push down, let go of lever, and the thing is locked, which is very cool, very quick, very easy. But long term, is that going to be a problem? Is it, it's harder to adjust because it's automatic. You can't just tighten it up as tight as you want. It's doing it itself, sort of thing. Can sort of push that, but I'm not sure if it is doing that much. So that one is easy, but I don't know long term. I haven't had these long enough. I don't use them that often to have anything wear out or anything. So the Makita on the same side as well, on the left, but I find it's just too far away from your hand when you're using the tool. I cannot reach it with my thumb when my hand is in the normal use position. It's only just touching it. So, I mean, you could maybe get your finger around there and flick it down. But yeah, it's tricky to reach. When it's in this up position, it is loose. When you pull it down, you lock it. So like that, nice and loose. And then boom, down to lock. But like I say, it's just a little bit, you've got to shift your hand around and rotate it a bit to actually get it down there. It's not it's not ergonomically that good in my opinion. But the plunge itself is probably the nicest, very easy to just plunge. I hate ones that are just too tight and you end up sort of jerking it too much where you're trying to push it down, whereas this, very easy. The HiKoki, pretty good too, but somewhat tighter than the Makita. And the Milwaukee, because you've got to hold this trigger down all the time, is a little bit trickier. And it just feels a bit stiffer, not quite as nice as the other two. But a lot of these things are personal preferences based on what you like and how big your hands are and all that sort of thing. But there's one thing that's not based on personal preference really, and that's power. Power is power. So what I'm going to do, we'll start with this bit, seeing as I've got it in there. We'll start with a 3/4 inch bit. We'll do a pass with each one through some treated pine, which will no doubt be a bit wet, and we'll maybe start at like 1/2 inch deep and then go from there. And then depending on how they go, we might ramp up to some larger bits. Follow me outside, assuming that it stopped raining. So it's a new day, the sun is shining thankfully, and we have 3 freshly charged batteries to go on our tools here. So I'm trying to find ones that are similar-ish in their output and stuff. This is the highest one from HiKoki, so we're sort of bound by that. So that's a 4 amp hour 36 volt battery. This is the new Makita F 4 amp hour battery, 36 volts of course as well, and the new 6 amp hour Forge battery for the Milwaukee. That should keep everyone happy, eh Tony? Yeah, well, exactly Tony. So let's get stuck into it. Now you will have just noticed the handle orientation is different on the Milwaukee to the HiKoki and the Makita, which I personally don't like. It just feels weird. I want the handles the other orientation when I'm running along a piece of wood like that. Like this, it just felt different to control anyway. And as you can see, it doesn't get rid of the dust as well. So even though the thing's still shooting around the same way, it's just jamming up. It wasn't firing out the back. The Makita cleaned the track. The HiKoki left a bit of shit at this end, whereas this one was just not clearing it at all. So it was struggling a little bit more. Pretty good though, still felt like it had a fair bit of power there. So after that test, the HiKoki, the Makita are both still showing 4 bars, but the Milwaukee is down to 3. Right, another day, another test. Let's get a few things out of the way, and what we're going to look at today is, it's going to be a bit of a torture test I think. I'm going to see how well they do with this. Now this is the largest bit that I have. I should weigh this actually. It's a fairly hefty feeling thing. It is a tongue and groove style bit, and this will be a good test on how much grunt these things have got, and we'll see if they can all handle it or whether some of them will cut out. Let me just find my scales. Oh, there they are, just over to the left, out of shot. Somebody upstairs using an impact driver. Keep it down, Tony. Right, let's just quickly weigh this. I don't think I've weighed it before. Wow, 340 grams, that's heavy. That is heavy. That is the third of the weight, I think, of this impact driver. I'll just take the battery off, let's check. More than a third. This is only 840 grams. That's 340 grams. Wow. 500 grams difference between that and that. So that's a hefty chunk of steel for these things to spin around. It's going to suck through the battery pretty darn quick, one would assume. So let's have a crack. We'll go through some, what are we going to use? We'll just use some treated pine again. It's 45 millimeters high, which means this thing probably can't quite get it all. It might be a little bit left either side. We'll have to have a look. And I have recharged all the batteries, so they're fresh, ready to go. Everything full. While we're here actually, seeing as we've got the scales here, who wants to see what the difference is between the weights of the batteries? Just a little bit of bonus content. Maybe my editor will put some of this on the screen in ounces or pounds or whatever other people use. 943. 982. Okay, so 40 grams lighter for the Makita, and the 6 amp hour forge from Milwaukee, 948. So these batteries all pretty much the same weight. No difference there on the tools for the weight. These two pretty much identical, and the HiKoki just a little bit higher. Battery is wigging out, overloaded. Flashing lights there indicate that battery ain't happy. Oh yeah, she's pretty toasty. Let's take it off, put it back on again, see if it'll be enough to clear it. We've only got about 400 millimeters left. She's not going to do it. Not with a forge battery. What lots of people think is the best battery, so I know somebody at this point will say, should be using the 12 amp hour. Do you want to put another massive battery on the top of this thing? It's heavy enough as it is. It's been 2 or 3 minutes. The battery has recovered. So we're on 2 bars showing. Can it finish this short little bit, or is it going to overload again? So close. Come on, Milwaukee. Damn. We overloading again? Yes, we are. Bugger. Let's see if you can see this with the reflection. It's a bit tricky, I know. Get to see my masked up face. Anyway, we are looking at, in the hottest part, about 52 degrees in the warmest spot, 50 to 52 degrees on the outside. Yeah, the top it hit there briefly was 53. So this might be a good test actually to show the difference in the heat dissipation between the pouch cells and the tab cells and the tabless, because we've got one of each in this particular video, which is really going to wind some of you up, isn't it? Still showing 2 bars on the battery. Not the greatest fuel gauges to see, the HiKoki ones. Let's test the temperature. Doesn't feel as hot as the last one. So I've left this a couple of minutes just like I did with the Milwaukee one. Let's now see if we can have a look-see here. What sort of temperatures are we hitting? Yeah, pretty similar. Ooh, up to 55. The 50 to 55 bracket. Hotter than I thought it might have been compared to the Milwaukee. Doesn't work too well in the sun. See if the Makita is any different. Okay, the 2-minute battery test, and there's like, I know this is going to be the coldest by a million miles. Okay, we're just hitting 40, the warmest cell there. Basically 35 to 37 most of it. 41 max. Right, I'm going to go back to the bench and talk more about this. Boy, oh boy, routers are messy, dusty bastards of things, aren't they? So, these are the 3 batteries I just used in the previous test. And this is the Makita, 4 bars. The HiKoki showing 3 bars. When I took it off, it originally was showing 2, but it's revived a little bit. Has this one revived any? No, the Milwaukee's showing 1. Now, I would expect that one would drain the quickest because it's got to do more work because it's 18 volt versus 36 volt for the other 2. So it's got to suck a lot more power out of this a lot quicker to try and make the motor in the Milwaukee run the same as these guys do. These guys can make it a little easier, and so it's a bit cooler, just a bit easier to pull off when you're using the 36 volts rather than the 18 volts. So that's your next argument point for the comment section. So looking now at the tools rather than the battery power, the first one that I did in that test, all the other tests I did the Makita first, and then I sort of tested the other 2 to see if they were the same. For this last test with this massive big tongue and groove bit, I started with the Milwaukee, and then I went to the HiKoki, and then I went to the Makita. And there was an obvious step of improvement from one to the other to the other. Up until this test, I wasn't as impressed with the Makita as I am now. Yeah, it was nice, it's doing the job, but it didn't feel as different to the other 2 as it did in that test with that bit, because the Milwaukee was wild and clunky, and if you look at the base on this thing, it's got these screws in it here for holding in your guides and your dust port and shit, and there's no spring or anything on them. These other 2 have springs here, and it stops them from falling out. Every time I use this thing, I forget to take them out, and they always vibrate out. You probably will have seen it. Well, maybe I don't know if it'll show up or not in the video, but fell out while I was using it, like they always do. So I'm going to end up losing those, of course, one day. Thankfully, I do have some spare ones that came with one of the other adapters for this thing. But yeah, that's annoying, having to remember to take those out, because else they just fall out by themselves. When it comes to changing bits, I'm going to have to move around the other side here. The Milwaukee is nice and easy because you can take the whole unit out of the base. So there's nothing in your way, so you can really have a good old wrench on this thing. Makita one, pretty good, no problems there. I don't like the HiKoki one, I never have. It always just feels tight. There's like not much room to move your spanner in there. The Milwaukee wins that particular feature. But anyway, getting back to that test. Yeah, so I did the Milwaukee. You could see the Milwaukee, the battery, couldn't hack it. Overheating, it's sucking out that juice too fast, like I say, just couldn't really do it. Kept overloading, kept overheating. Then I changed to the HiKoki, started off feeling nice, and I thought, oh yeah, but I could tell I couldn't push it too hard. And then it started doing what you saw it do. So it was the tool overloading rather than the battery though. On the Milwaukee, it was the battery. So you could have just taken the battery off, chucked another battery on, carried along, and keep swapping between batteries as they crap out. Whereas this one is the tool overloading, so all you need to do is just reset the trigger and away you go again. But it was struggling a little bit with that massive big bit. Then I changed to the Makita, and much, much nicer. Now, I know some of you right now are bitching about the batteries down in the comment section. What do you want me to do about it? You know, these companies don't make the same batteries. I mean, I could have been really evil and put the 8 amp hour battery on here, and it would have smashed these other 2 even more. Yeah, I could have put a 12 amp hour on there, but an 8 and a 12 on these, ridiculous. Okay, you don't want a massive, giant, big thing on there. They're already heavy enough. So this tool with this battery turned out to be a very nice combo. This has tabless cells if you want to know more about that. I'll put a couple of videos up here in the top corner. The HiKoki only has 2 battery types. They just have a 2.5 amp hour and a 4 amp hour. and that's it for the 36 volt tools. And they're not tabless. They have recently released new batteries, but they were before the tabless cells came out, so pretty sure they don't have tabless cells in them. I can't find anything saying they have tabless cells in them. But if it turns out they do, then maybe one day I'll test this again. But if you want even more power with this and longer runtime, you can go up to a 5 amp hour battery, an 8 amp hour battery, whereas you're stuck with the 4 on this. So yeah, the Makita felt like it had a lot more power to begin with, so I was pushing it a lot quicker than I could with the HiKoki. And I thought, oh yeah, I just slowly trying to creep it up to see when it would cut out. And then once it did cut out, it wanted to cut out more and more. Once the tool was overloaded and wasn't happy, then it started doing it a bit more, and I had to back that speed off a bit towards the end of that cut. But definitely this one handled that job much better than the other two, and much more noticeable on that particular task than on the other tasks that I've done with these things. Also, you will have noticed, because I didn't use the fence, I used the bit with the bearing on the bottom there to follow a board underneath. That meant I could run the Milwaukee with the handles in the same orientation, because this one, like I said earlier, you have to run sideways if you've got that fence on it, but without the fence, if you've got a bit with a roller on it, you can just run it the way you should be able to do it and push it the way that I did. So that was a better test for these. I thought I'll do it that way I can push all three of them the same. So there's things I like about all three of these routers, and at the beginning, like I say, I was actually leaning towards the HiKoki being my favorite, just because it's a little bit smaller and it felt, it feels nice in the hand and everything. The Makita just a little bit chunkier and didn't feel like it was an improvement over this. They're both nicer to use than this, but this still gets most jobs done, no problem. But yeah, as I've used it more and more, the Makita is feeling nicer and more powerful. It's got the better battery options than the HiKoki with these 236 volt ones here to give you the power if you need it. I know a lot of you are going to say, oh, you shouldn't have been doing that on full whack. Well, it was a power test, okay? I wanted to know when they would cut out. They had to be on full whack. Can't test them on the lowest speeds. They all have different low speeds and everything. So the only way you can really compare most tools is if you do them on their highest possible setting, because the lowest settings are a random setting. They're different markers for the lowest one. But the top one, well, that's as good as it can get, then that's what you go for. Now, I could test these things for weeks with all sorts of different materials, all sorts of different router bits, and maybe the results would be slightly different, and maybe one tool would do better than another one on a specific task. But, there's only so much life I have. Also, with the Makita, you can use this if you've got one of these. I use this one on the 1/4 inch. Now it can be used, of course, on the 1/2 inch as well. That fits on pretty much everything. I think I already said that. You can also get a track adapter for this, so you can run it on your rails or tracks that you use on your track saw. And I'll put the number for that if I can find it down in the description. I'll put some links or something. And no, I haven't put it up against the DeWalt, because the DeWalt one has not been released yet. Not in this part of the world anyway. Haven't seen it anywhere. So at the time of recording this video, it didn't exist. So please don't tell me I should have put it up against the DeWalt. The plunge on the Makita, nicer than the other two. Definitely the smoothest, easiest plunge. And it's got a bit extra depth than this one. And on this one as well, you may have seen it in the video, I don't know if it was visible or not, you can't get the router bits in as far. The Milwaukee and the Makita, you can get them right up in there. Leave them out a little bit though, of course, because you don't want them hard up against there, but that's another video to describe all that. I'm sure I've said that many times before. But this one, yeah, it leaves quite a bit of the shaft sticking out, which not the best for transferring the power, and more likely to get potentially a bit sort of wobbly on it. But nothing I can do about it. If that's the way it's made, that's the way it's made. The Makita one, I don't like this system. Makita, it would have been nice if you had stuck in actual collet nuts like this. These ones do. Every other one that I have bought does, but for some reason Makita have gone with this, which you shove those in there. It's just another thing to go wrong, isn't it? It's just, you could end up having that slipping loose. You've got two tightening surfaces instead of just the one, and it's not ideal. But I'm guessing you could just buy a Makita version of those for any one you want. The Milwaukee comes with so many of them in this part of the world. Don't even know how many of them anymore. There's 5 or 6 of them. Metric and Imperial, so that was good with the Milwaukee one. But in the end, apart from that, if I had to pick one, yeah, it'd probably be the Makita. I didn't think so at first, but it grew on me. Once I realized, yeah, I started using a bit more, feeling the power difference, feeling that I was having to go slower with the HiKoki on things than I could with the Makita. So it's pretty similar to the HiKoki, just a bit more grunt, a few more little features. The HiKoki is probably a little bit better with this, which I spoke about earlier, than the Makita version. I do kind of like that the Makita version is on the other side though, rather than having both on the same side with the HiKoki, so it's kind of 50-50, you know. They're all good tools basically, but yeah, if I had to pick one now for smoothness and just that nice power, you know, the nice flow of power without it being too aggressive and everything. As per usual, you know, Makita is good at that stuff. This one's good at power pretty much all the time, but you know, never as refined as a Makita or a HiKoki for that matter. When it comes to power as well, you could use this with a power adapter, you can plug it into the wall. But yeah, why did you buy a cordless tool if you've got to do that? Plus those power adapters are a little bit sketchy at times, and it's got a big brick in the middle of it. They're not the nicest things to use. And I've heard a lot of bad things about them. I do have one, but there was no point in testing it in this video because the other two don't have them. Dust extraction on all of them sucks too, by the way, but you already knew that, right? That's why I didn't bother doing it on a test like this. There's just so much stuff going everywhere. There's just dust extraction hasn't got a hope. Anyway, thanks for watching. There's heaps more Makita 40 volt stuff coming up soon. There's some of those good things you wanted. I mean, a lot of you have been asking about this. And there's another couple coming up in the next few months that will silence a few of you finally, maybe, hopefully. We'll see. Cheers, guys. See ya. Special cheers to these guys.